Okay, let's maybe start here. Have you ever been somewhere completely new?
Hmm.
I mean, a place where everything just feels different? The sounds, smells, the whole rhythm of life?
Yeah, totally unfamiliar.
Maybe you were just, visiting, but for that moment, you felt it, right? That feeling of being a bit of an outsider.
Oh, absolutely. Just trying to figure out the unspoken rules or even like how to order a coffee correctly. It hits you even on a short trip. It's universal, isn't it?
Right. So now imagine taking that feeling and sort of magnifying it
Right.
a lot.
Okay.
Imagine that feeling isn't temporary. It's the backdrop to your whole new life.
Right.
That's really the heart of what we want to explore today. The really human journey of moving somewhere new, immigrant life and cultural identity.
And we're looking at this through a set of sources. A listener actually shared articles, some research, all digging into what it really means, what it feels like to move, build a life, and figure out where you fit.
Yeah, exactly. This isn't about dry numbers or policies today. It's about people's real experiences,
Yeah.
navigating huge changes, trying to hold on to who you are, finding your place.
So to start getting a handle on this journey, the sources bring up a really key difference right away. It shapes how we even think about moving and settling.
What's that?
It's the difference between cultural assimilation and cultural integration.
Ah, okay. They sound similar, but I guess they're quite different in practice. Assimilation sounds like blending in completely, maybe even losing parts of yourself.
That's pretty much it. Assimilation suggests cultures kind of merge into one dominant one, but the sources contrast that really sharply with integration.
Okay.
Integration is more about cultures coexisting,
Yeah.
celebrating differences even, and building an inclusive society together.
So integration isn't just about the person moving, changing, is it? It
Yeah.
sounds like it's just as much about the place they move to creating space.
Exactly. Like, the sources use the example of a local government maybe supporting cultural festivals or offering language classes.
Right.
That's integration in action. It's saying your culture is welcome. It adds something here.
Which is the opposite of maybe not recognizing or supporting minority cultures, which leans more towards assimilation.
Precisely. And what's really interesting is that integration isn't painted as this one single thing. The sources talk about it like a spectrum, somewhere between full assimilation and maybe pure multiculturalism.
And it depends.
Yeah, it varies. It depends on why someone moved in the first place. The purpose behind their migration really shapes that journey.
That makes a lot of sense. And the adaptation process itself, it's not always smooth sailing, is it? The sources mention that.
No, not at all. They talk about maybe an initial excitement, like a honeymoon
Yeah.
phase, but then challenges often come up later. Things can get difficult. One source even uses the term crisis phase.
Wow. Okay. So that brings us right into the lived experience, doesn't it? Moving from these ideas to what people actually face day to day.
Yes, and a lot of the really vivid details here come from one particular study the sources highlighted. It focused on Pakistani women immigrants in Norway. It gives a very personal perspective.
So what did that study and the other sources tell us about the reasons people make such a huge life change?
Well, it often comes down to really fundamental things. Looking for work, obviously,
Yeah.
trying to build a better economic future for their family.
Family reunification, too, I imagine.
Absolutely. That's a big one. And sometimes it's about escaping difficult situations like political or religious oppression, or just pursuing personal dreams.
Makes sense.
And the sources note a common pattern: often men migrate first, establish things a bit, and then their families join them later.
Okay, so they arrive, they've often left so much behind. What are those first big hurdles they hit?
The study in Norway was really clear on this: language. That's often the main barrier.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, think about trying to navigate everything: shopping, forms, finding a job when you don't speak the language well. It's incredibly isolating.
Especially maybe for older people.
Right.
Did this study mention that?
It did, yes. Older generations often found learning Norwegian particularly tough.
And language. It's not just about daily tasks, is it? It's the key to education, to better jobs. It unlocks the door to the new place.
It really does. And beyond language, the sources talk about just the sheer difference in culture. Everything.
Mhm.
Social norms, maybe even the weather can be a shock.
Little things we take for granted.
Exactly. And practical things, too, like knowing where to find specific foods. Halal meat was an example. Or even just figuring out how to connect with others from your community when you're new.
Right, finding that support network, all of that must feed into that deeper emotional challenge the sources mentioned, just feeling like a stranger.
It does. And unfortunately, there's another layer the sources address, a really difficult one: facing discrimination.
Okay. What kind of experiences did the study or other sources talk about there?
Well, the study with Pakistani women gave some very specific examples. Facing discrimination just for wearing a hijab, running into obstacles when looking for jobs, and sometimes feeling there was unfairness when dealing with official bodies, like the NAV office, which is their public welfare agency in Norway.
So a feeling that sometimes people in the host society might favor their own, or that immigrants aren't always seen or treated as well as equals.
Yes, those were experiences reported in the study. And the sources also bring in a formal definition of racial discrimination, drawing on human rights ideas,
How do they frame that?
as any distinction or exclusion based on race, color, or origin that basically gets in the way of enjoying fundamental human rights in public life.
That's important context.
It is. And the sources are careful to present these as the experiences people shared, acknowledging that for many, this is a real part of their reality.
Understood. So people are there, they're grappling with these hurdles, starting to find their feet. How do they navigate their own sense of self, their identity? Living between these two worlds must be complex.
Hugely complex, and this is where the sources get really interesting. It's about finding a balance between your culture of origin for the women in the study. That meant Islamic and Pakistani values, like the parda system, traditional dress, religious practices, and the culture of the new country. Norway, in this case, with its more open social norms, different ways of dressing, different customs.
Right. I think one source mentioned having a double cultural and religious role, like maybe acting one way at home and adapting outside.
Exactly that. Simple examples like maybe wearing different clothes depending on where you are, or making sure you follow religious practices like daily prayers.
Does that always create tension?
Interestingly, no, not always. The sources point out that for some people, especially maybe those who've been there longer, this dual role works okay. They see practicing their religion, like taking prayer breaks at work, as just a right they have.
Which sounds positive, like integration is working there.
It does. But as you said, for others, maybe newer immigrants or those whose identity is more visible, like through wearing a hijab, it can unfortunately lead back to those difficulties, even discrimination we talked about.
It's complicated.
Very. And this leads to another idea the sources raise: transnational identities.
What does that mean exactly?
It's not just about keeping ties to your home country. It's about being genuinely integrated in the new place while also keeping strong connections and identity with your country of origin, maybe even being involved back home somehow.
So it's not an either-or.
Not at all. It's dynamic. Your identity keeps evolving. The sources do acknowledge that people might go through an identity crisis at the start.
That seems understandable.
Yeah, but they also show that people often work through it, find that balance, and build their new lives.
Okay, so we've definitely touched on some significant challenges. What about the other side? What do the sources say about successful integration? Efforts people make, community support, the positive outcomes.
This is where the sources really drive home that integration isn't just on the immigrant, it's a two-way street. The society they join plays a massive role.
How so?
Well, the sources list concrete things communities can do, things that show they're genuinely embracing cultural integration.
Like what kind of things?
Things like making an effort to educate yourself and others about different cultures, actively supporting policies that are inclusive.
Celebrating diversity, not just putting up with it.
Exactly. Showcasing it through festivals, cultural events, promoting open conversations, really listening to different perspectives, and creating places, schools, workplaces, community centers where everyone feels like they actually belong.
That makes sense. I remember one source mentioned an organization, save a few, doing work using arts and workshops.
Yes, using things like performing arts and training to create platforms, letting people tell their own stories, build connections. It's powerful stuff.
And who else needs to be involved in supporting integration?
Lots of players, according to the sources. Governments are key, obviously, implementing policies, providing welfare systems, education, healthcare. The study noted how important that support was in Norway back in the 80s. Setting up things like universal ID systems helps too.
But policies can change, right? They might get stricter.
Yes, the sources mention that caution that policies aren't static. And they also stress how important it is for migrants themselves to have a voice in decisions that affect them.
Makes sense. What about the community itself?
The receiving community needs to invest in educating everyone, not just focus support only on the newcomers. And the private sector businesses, they're crucial too.
Wow.
By making it easier to get jobs, providing training, genuinely valuing diversity in their workforce, and making sure they uphold basic human and labor rights.
Let's go back to that study in Norway. Amidst all the challenges, did the women share positive experiences too?
Oh, absolutely. That was really clear too. Many talked about finding religious freedom within the bounds of Norwegian society.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, and appreciating the system of equal rights and justice, valuing the social safety net education, healthcare support, and many describe Norwegians generally as honest and hardworking.
That's really important to hear alongside the difficulties.
It is, and maybe one of the most striking findings was how the immigrants themselves felt they changed over time.
Oh,
They reported becoming more confident, more independent, more trusting, honest, and respectful of others. It really points to integration being a personal transformation, not just fitting in.
that really speaks to that idea of social cohesion, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Building trust between different groups is just fundamental for a community to work well.
Totally. And the study was encouraging, reporting that most of the women they spoke to ultimately did feel integrated. They felt they were living happy, successful lives. They saw integration as this long, complex, but ultimately positive process of change.
You know, we even see attempts at this on a huge scale. One source mentioned the Beijing Olympics as an example,
Ah, right.
trying to frame it as this global moment where cultures came together, highlighting traditional Chinese culture alongside the international sports, promoting this vision of integration, communication, inclusiveness. Their slogan was something like, "Together for a shared future," wasn't it?
Yeah, it's like a big symbolic gesture towards these ideas we've been talking about.
So, looking back over everything, we've kind of traced this journey from that initial feeling of being an outsider, understanding these concepts like assimilation versus integration,
Right, then digging into the real world challenges, language, discrimination, finding your way.
navigating that complex balancing act of identity, living between worlds.
And finally, looking at how bridges are built, the efforts towards integration from everyone involved, and the positive changes that can happen.
And it's just so clear, isn't it? Integration isn't something just one side does. Yes, immigrants adapt and put in huge effort, but the welcome, the support, the openness from the society they join is just as crucial.
It really is a two-way street. And exploring all this feels relevant for pretty much everyone,
I
right?
think so.
Whether you're an immigrant yourself or your family came from somewhere else generations ago, or you just live in a diverse place, which is most places now.
Yeah.
Understanding these experiences, the highs and the lows, it just helps us connect better, helps build stronger, more resilient communities.
It definitely makes you look around your own neighborhood differently, doesn't it? Appreciate all the different threads that make it what it is.
Absolutely. So maybe a final thought for you listening. How can you be part of building a more inclusive community right where you are?
Yeah, what's one small thing you could do? Maybe learn something new about a different culture that's present in your community. Or just strike up a conversation this week with someone whose background is different from yours.
Just being open, being curious, it all helps.